In the south of France, in August 1944, a Polish woman walked alone toward a Gestapo prison and decided to talk 3 men off the execution list. She had no army behind her, no radio, no rank that the men inside would recognize. What she had was a story, and the nerve to tell it without blinking. Inside that prison sat Francis Kammertz, the British officer who ran the entire resistance network east of the Rhone. Beside him, 2 more agents. All 3 had been sentenced to death as spies. They were to be shot within hours. The Krystyna Skarbek Digne Gestapo rescue is one of the strangest operations of the Second World War, because the weapon was not a gun. It was a lie, delivered with absolute calm to men who tortured people for a living. Here's the question the whole story turns on. Can one unarmed woman convince a Gestapo officer that she commands the approaching Allied army when she commands nothing at all? If he checks, she dies with them. To understand what she was about to attempt, you have to understand the thing she was walking into. The Gestapo was the secret police of Nazi Germany. In occupied France, its job was to find people exactly like her and break them. Arrest, interrogation, torture, execution. That was the machine. It did not negotiate. It did not bend. By the summer of 1944, it had killed across France with a thoroughness that left whole towns afraid to speak above a whisper. And in Digne-les-Bains, a town in the Alps of southern France, the machine had just made its biggest catch of the year. On the 13th of August, 1944, 3 men drove toward Digne and hit a German roadblock. One was Francis Kammertz, codenamed Roger, the British Special Operations Executive Officer who built and ran the Jockey Network, the web of resistance cells stretching from the Rhone to the Italian border. The Special Operations Executive was Britain's sabotage and resistance service, created by Churchill to set occupied Europe on fire. Kammertz was one of its very best. With him were 2 more agents, Zan Fielding, a British officer who had already survived years under cover in Crete, and Christian Sorensen, a French officer. They should have walked through. Their forged papers were good, but Kammertz had made one small mistake. He had been given a large sum of cash for operations, and he had split it between the 3 of them. At the checkpoint, a young German civilian flipped through their banknotes, and he noticed something. The serial numbers ran in sequence, the same series. 3 strangers, claiming not to know each other, carrying money printed back to back. That was it. That was the thread that unraveled everything. The 3 were taken to Digne prison and interrogated hard. They claimed they were black marketeers, hoping to explain the cash. The Gestapo did not believe them. The sentence came down fast: death. Now hold this in your mind. The best resistance organizer in the entire region was in a cell, hours from a firing squad, and the only person in a position to do anything about it was his courier, a woman the Germans did not even know existed. Her name was Krystyna Skarbek. In France, she went by Christine Granville. She was Polish, born in 1908 to a count and a Jewish banking heiress, raised on a country estate where she learned to ride, to shoot, and to be afraid of almost nothing. When Poland fell in 1939, she did not wait to be useful. She volunteered for British intelligence and proposed something insane: to ski over the Tatra Mountains into occupied Poland, in winter, carrying intelligence. They let her try. She did it again and again, through one of the worst winters on record. On one crossing, she carried out microfilm pointing to Germany's coming invasion of the Soviet Union. Here's the part that matters most for what came next. In 1941, the Gestapo arrested her in Hungary, 2 days into interrogation, she bit her own tongue until her mouth filled with blood and let them think she was coughing it up. A chest x-ray showed scarring on her lungs. The Gestapo, terrified of tuberculosis, let her go. Think about that. She had already beaten the Gestapo once, not with force, but by feeding them a story they were afraid to disbelieve. That was her real edge. Not the pistol, not the knife. The ability to look a killer in the eye and make him doubt himself. By July 1944, she was a trained agent, and on the night of the 6th, she parachuted into southern France as Cammert's courier. The previous courier, Cicely Lefort, had been captured by the Germans and would not survive. Krystyna knew exactly what the job cost. For weeks, she worked the mountains, linking French and Italian fighters, talking conscripted Poles in German uniform into deserting. She was good at it. She was trusted. And then word reached her that Cammert's had been taken, that the network's leader and 2 others were going to be shot. She was 36 years old, alone, and the resistance had no force anywhere near strong enough to storm a Gestapo prison. She knew it. She asked the local maquis to try a rescue anyway. They refused. It was suicide. So the armed option was dead before it started, which left only one weapon, the one she had used in Hungary: a story. First, she had to find them and confirm they were even alive. She put aside a personal dislike of bicycles and cycled around 40 kilometers, about 25 miles, into Digne. Then she did something almost childlike in its simplicity. She walked outside of the prison walls, humming an old tune she and Cammert's both knew, the blues ballad Frankie and Johnny. For a while, nothing. Then, faintly from inside the walls, a man hummed it back. He was alive. He was there. Now she had to get him out. She found her way to Captain Albert Schenk, an Alsatian who served as the liaison between the local French authorities and the Gestapo, a man with a foot in both worlds, and a reputation locals would not soon forget. To him, she introduced the story she would ride all the way to the end. She was not just a courier, she told him. She was a British parachutist. She was Cammert's wife. And, the detail that made men go quiet, she was a niece of General Bernard Montgomery, the most famous British commander of the war. None of it was true. All of it was delivered as fact. Then came the threat, and the offer in the same breath. If harm came to the prisoners, the reprisals would be swift and terrible. And for 2 million francs, the whole problem could go away. Here's the open loop she had just created for herself. She did not have 2 million francs. She had no radio link to Montgomery or anyone else. Every word was a bet that no one would call. She informed London, and London airdropped 2 million francs into occupied France so she could make the bluff real. On the 17th of August, she was back in Schenk's office, the money in hand. By now, the timing was doing her work for her. The Allied landings in southern France had come on the 15th. American troops were roughly 60 kilometers away, about 37 miles, and closing fast. Every German and every collaborator in Digne could feel the ground shifting under them. Schenk, by some accounts, increasingly afraid of what the town would do to him when the Allies arrived, agreed to make an introduction. He took her to the one man who could actually sign the prisoners out. A Gestapo officer, a Belgian, named Max Wehm. She had talked her way to the door of the room she'd been trying to reach. Now she had to walk through it and lie to a Gestapo officer's face for as long as it took. Get one detail wrong, and she would simply join the men she came to save. She met Wehm in Schenk's apartment in the late afternoon, and for 3 hours she ran the most dangerous performance of her life. The room was the kind of place where the rules were simple. The Gestapo asked, you answered. They decided whether you lived. She walked in and quietly inverted all of it. She was not there to be questioned. She was there to make an offer he could not afford to refuse. She told him the Allies would arrive at any moment. She told him she was a British parachutist in constant wireless contact with the advancing forces. She spoke as if the outcome of the war was already settled, and she was simply deciding where he would stand in it. And then she gave him the prop. She produced a handful of wireless transmitter crystals, the small components a radio operator uses to lock onto a frequency. They were broken, useless. To Vaim, they were proof. Proof that she really was who she claimed. That there really was a radio. That there really was an army on the other end of it. She laid the evidence of her power on the table, and the evidence was junk. That handful of dead crystals was the entire bluff made physical. Everything rested on him believing a few worthless pieces of mineral were a live line to the men who would soon hold his fate. She did not raise her voice. She told him calmly that he should think carefully about her proposition, that as she had already warned the captain, if anything happened to her husband or his friends, the reprisals would come fast. Because both of these men had an infamous reputation among the locals, and the locals would not forget. That was the knife in the sentence. Not a threat from her, a reminder of what was already true. The Allies were coming. The resistance had a long memory. And when liberation came, men like Vaim and Schenk would be hunted through the streets. She was not offering to hurt him. She was offering to be the only thing that could save him. Somewhere in those 3 hours, the suspicion in the room turned. Vaim brought the butt of his revolver down on the table and asked the question that meant she had won. If he got them out of prison, what would she do to protect him? Read that again. The Gestapo officer was no longer deciding whether to execute her. He was asking her for mercy. She gave him terms. She promised he would not be handed to the British, that he would be protected when the reckoning came. It was the last piece of the same bluff. Her power to forgive, sold as confidently as her power to destroy. And he took the deal. A Gestapo officer, holding 3 condemned Allied spies, agreed to let them walk, on the word of an unarmed woman and a fistful of broken crystals. That evening, the same day they had been sentenced to die, Kammertz, Fielding, and Sorensen were marched out of their cells by Vaim, who was dressed in his SS uniform. They thought it was the end. Men marched out of that prison and went to the football ground to be shot. They braced for it. Instead, Vaim walked them to a car. They were driven to the edge of Digne, where a single figure stood waiting in the dark. Krystyna. And here is the detail that tells you how completely she had buried her own fear. She climbed into the car without a flicker of recognition. No nod, no smile. The 3 men assumed she was a prisoner too, swept up in the same net. They drove to the bank of a river. There, Fielding helped Vaim dig a hole and bury the SS tunic he had been wearing, the Gestapo man erasing himself before the Allies arrived. And only then, watching their captor hide his own uniform in the dirt, did the prisoners understand. They were not being executed. They were free. 2 days later, the American army reached Digne. The Maquis had already cleared the way, and there was almost no fighting left to do. The cost did not land all the winners. The 2 million francs had gone to Schenk. Soon after the prisoners left, he was murdered in a wood near the town, by a person or persons unknown. His widow kept the money, and after the war tried to exchange the old notes for new francs. She was arrested, then released once she explained where it came from. And in the end, the fortune was worth only a few thousand. Kammertz and Krystyna later helped her get home. And Vaim, the Gestapo officer who lost? Krystyna kept her word. She fought British officials to protect him from the arrest, with some success. He survived the war and went back to Belgium. The woman who beat him had promised mercy, and she delivered it. As for Krystyna, the strangest part came later. She told a fellow Pole years afterward that during those 3 hours she had felt no fear at all. It only caught up with her once it was over. "What have I done?" she said. "They could have shot me as well." She had walked into the den of the most feared police force in Europe, armed with nothing but a story and a handful of broken glass, and she had walked 3 men out the other side. Kammertz named his daughter after her. The system that did not negotiate had negotiated. The killers who asked the questions had ended up begging for protection, and the only shots fired at Digne that week were the ones that never came. She did not beat the Gestapo with a weapon. She beat it by making its own fear louder than its cruelty, and then offering to be the cure. If stories of ordinary people outsmarting impossible systems are what you're here for, stay with the channel. There are more of them, and they're true.